You're welcome. So this meeting is called Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness. So as I often invite us to do, I'll invite us today also to really allow let's say, clarity and direction of the name of the meeting to enter into us. So you can just notice how the tendency is to just gloss over things. So there's just a tendency to take things at a superficial level, and that's not bad. It's part of the way that things work. But we want to be conscious of that, because if we're unconscious of that, then, well, we're just unconscious. And so then whatever it is that's already happening, we're going to get more of that. So that's not bad. Well, you might think it's bad, but what I mean is that we could really see that reality is neutral in regard to there's no value judgment from reality regarding what is. What is completely neutral. But if we don't like it, if we're unhappy, then we want to be, in fact, I would say it's essential that we are conscious, because if we, or at least that we allow consciousness into the equation to do its work in terms of bringing about true and thereby sustainable positive change. So what does this have to do with just taking things superficially? Well, it has everything to do with it, because you'll notice that the tendency, as I've already pointed out, is simply to let's see if I can put it in another way. That we hear something and that triggers a reaction. It triggers some conditioning. So it triggers perhaps an understanding that we already have. So we're comparing our present reduction of what is, not the totality of what is, but just our snapshot, a reduction of what is. And then we're comparing that to something that we think we already understand. Well, what that does is it continues to perpetuate the existing conditioning. So when we want something different, when we're unhappy with the present conditioning, which we'll know because the conditioning is the same as our perception, which is the same as our experience. So those are synonyms. So you've maybe heard this idea that we create our reality, and this is true, but usually we have a misunderstanding of what that really means. It's not that we are necessarily generating objective reality as something external to us. Rather, it is simply that what we consider to be our experience, which is the same as our perception. See, that you can't have experience without perception. And perception is, we could say, has two key elements to it. One is awareness, because without awareness, there's no perception. And the other is the conditioning. So the conditioning is the filter that takes the unlimited totality of awareness the pure potential and reduces it. It doesn't really reduce it, but it generates the appearance of reducing it into something limited, which isn't bad. It's just the nature of the manifest experience is that we have, in order for there to be any experience, there has to be some kind of polarity. We can't have light as something that we can conceive of unless it has an opposite, which is dark. So you see that everything in our perception has an opposite. There's contrast. That's how we're able to perceive. So fundamental to that is awareness, which is non-dual. So there's no polarization at the level of pure awareness. But there's conditioning. The conditioning is like a filter. So this filter is what, in a sense, is generating that polarization, and then we're attracted to one pole or the other. So when we are allowing ourselves just to remain with the superficial level, we miss out on the opportunity for real change. In fact, we're unwittingly continuing to perpetuate the existing pattern, the existing conditioning, even if, in fact, I would say particularly when we believe that we're doing something to change it. This is the trickiest thing, because we keep on thinking, now I understand, now I'm going to do the thing that's going to change it. And every single time when we take that approach where we think we understand and we're going to do something to bring about change, what we're doing actually is remaining unconscious, because we're just staying at a superficial level, which is a distraction. And unwittingly, unconsciously, we are continuing to perpetuate the vicious cycle through this. So something as simple as just slowing down and taking in the deeper significance of just the title or the name of the meeting actually can be surprisingly useful. So just hear the words: relax into health, wealth, and happiness. And there's not a right understanding or a wrong understanding in an objective sense. There's just you being aware of what's happening. So notice that if you just, as you slow down and you just receive the invitation of the name of the meeting, that it reveals everything. It can be very surprising, but it really does reveal everything. So that might seem strange at first, but just see that it's true. So just test it out. So just notice as I say the words, what is happening. So you notice it triggers something in you. How do you know it triggers something in you? Because there's some experience. It doesn't have to be a dramatic experience, although it could be a dramatic experience, but it could be something that is, in fact, it'll be very likely that it's a very familiar experience. And in fact, it may be an experience that you think you don't like. So just notice that whatever that reaction is, it could be boredom, frustration, discouragement, excitement, anticipation, impatience, anything is possible, but just notice. It could be many of those things, but just notice it. So, or it could be like a tendency to tune out. All of these are possible. Anger. So relax into health, wealth, and happiness. So could it really be that that's true? Notice that we don't believe that it's true. We believe that there's got to be something else. Couldn't be that. Couldn't be that simple. How could we have a whole meeting about that? That couldn't be that simple. It's got to be, that's just, it's like bait and switch. Sounds good, but the cynical mind says, but that's just a deception. It can't really be that simple. It can't be that easy to relax in health, wealth, and happiness. I know that there's actually some great difficulty that must be endured, and I've got to take a bunch of time because it couldn't be that now for me. So just see how that conditioning, those beliefs are there. So now I use the word belief. So take a look and see what is a belief? What is conditioning? What is belief? What is conditioning? Are they synonyms? Maybe. Are they not synonyms? Find out. So how do you find out? You just look at your direct experience. So the words, notice the words are just pointers. They're just sounds. So there's a vibration, right? At a very simple level, we can see it's just a vibration, right? So hear the sound, the vibration, belief. Hear the vibration of conditioning. So notice that these words, they're different vibration, right? I'm not trying to get too esoteric. If you really look at in a very simple way, you can see that that's true. There's just vibration. So this isn't woo woo. It's sort of materialist, okay? That you just have these vibrations. Now, notice that your experience is different of these two vibrations: conditioning, belief. Your experience is different. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but you perceive them as different. We all perceive them as different. It's not wrong. That's just, we perceive them as different. But why do we perceive them as different? What is different about them? Well, we could say there's some difference in the vibration. Yes. But why? But what is the different? What is that in terms of our perception? So look at your experience. Belief, conditioning. These are kind of, in a sense, arbitrary. It could be any words, but here we're just using these two. So notice that they just trigger different reactions. There's a different set, maybe subtle, but nonetheless, some different set of associations with these vibrations. So the vibrations on their own are simply vibrations. They don't have any meaning. Let's say, other than just simply that they are that vibration. But the meaning is, when we say meaning, what are we looking? What is the meaning? Can you see that the meaning is the association? So for you, there's this vibration of this belief or conditioning or any vibration, any word. It has, in your nervous system, has particular associations. What are those associations? Well, anything that any phenomena that you could be aware of. So what would that be? Just, we can sort of catalog the different possibilities. I won't try to be exhaustive about it, but you can notice there's a feeling, sensation, image, which could be inner imagery, outer imagery, present imagery, past imagery, which we would usually consider to be a memory, narrative. I don't know. see if you can figure out other things. But that, just gives you a sense of these things are associated. And so that vibration, that word, and it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be a word. Anything can serve as that. Anything is a vibration, and that vibration, simply by virtue of the fact that in your nervous system is associated with this constellation of phenomena. And again, I'm just talking about feeling, sensation, image, thought, narrative, and so forth. It's the association that assigns this meaning or gives a shape or significance to the vibration. So now you have a position relative to this. And the tendency is for us to defend our position, no matter what, even if our position is very painful, totally dysfunctional, and just flat out wrong. We will unconsciously defend it, so long as we're not adequately consciously aware of what it is that's happening. Which is why we take so much time with these things that just seem maybe so bizarre, or I don't know, I don't know how they strike you. I mean, you keep showing up, so it must be you must receive some value, but relative to what's on offer in the world, this is kind of strange. Most of what's on offer in the world, you can see, if you really look at it, it's do these things, right? It's the premise of most of what's out there is just learn to do these things. So we'll just add on more stuff, whatever that is. You're gonna strengthen something, you're gonna reinforce something, you're gonna add something, this is the notion of most of what's out there, whatever that is, from psychology and self-help, and most of what passes for spirituality. Most of it is just, let's take on some more stuff, do more stuff. What we're looking at here is not really about doing more. It's about discovering what we're already doing. So really important premise that I share is that there is no, there's a common habit in this world of believing that my experience, or that one's experience, is something that is done to the person by some external agent, whether that's another person or some circumstances or God or life or whatever. But you notice that most of what, or a disease, right? You notice how we objectify everything. So, we give names to them, and it's like, this is useful to in a very limited way, but most of the time labeling things ends up feeding back into the vicious cycle. So then we just go, there's names of the day. So the name, notice how the name, again, this is at a superficial level, keeps us mesmerized. We're looking for the thing, whether, just to give an example, right? There was a time during Freud's day when things would have been called hysteria. Maybe, is that the word that was used? I think hysterical manifestations. Well, then that passed out of popularity, and then fast forward many years, and now it's no longer called that. Now it's going to be called chronic fatigue syndrome. And, then that's passes that, that's not in vogue, and it's fibromyalgia. Now I understand I'm offending people because they're going to say these are not the same, they're different. I'm not going to, I don't want to get into a pissing contest about that. The point is just to see that fundamentally we have to look and tell the truth. Am I better off for these labels, or are the labels really just keeping me distracted at a superficial level instead of noticing something very fundamentally important and useful, which is, what am I doing? See, if I'm the victim of other people or diseases or circumstances or my past or the past of humanity or the past of whatever, if I'm a victim of anything, then I have really no power. So that's not a, that's a very, see, that's a very low state. It's a very, very low state. And we keep ourselves stuck in that low state because in so many ways, in one of those ways is that we get some, and again, this is at a superficial level, we get some new superficial knowledge, and we understand that only superficially, and we think that we have better understanding. So for example, we'll think that, oh, now I have some sort of spiritual understanding, and based on something I've read or some meetings I've attended or some experience I've had or whatever. And we think that that's somehow going to be new and useful and that's more true. But when we're really, really, really honest, what we have to see is that all that's happened is that we substituted some old thing for some new thing superficially, but fundamentally we're still doing the same thing, and therefore we're still having the same experience fundamentally, which is to say we're unhappy, in pain, and so forth. So at a certain point, we really want to recognize that what this fundamental principle that that there is no experience without the action that I'm taking to produce that experience. So every experience that I have is my doing. So I cannot be a victim, not a possibility. There is no possibility, none. And if that's not provocative, I don't know what is. I mean, if you don't notice, so you just notice how your mind makes exceptions. It says, oh, well, I get that that's true of 99% of things, but there's this one exception, and I am that exception. So I'm off the hook. And we just want to see that. We want to see that tendency to make exceptions. But this is a fundamental principle, so it doesn't act, there is no exception to it. It's in the manifest reality, in this phenomenal reality, it is simply true. It's just like, night follows day, just like there is, the polarity is a reality in the phenomenal world. You can't avoid that. That is inherent in the nature of phenomenal reality. And so these are the two poles of experience. and they are not separate. They're not two separate, distinct things. You can never have one without the other. They always, always, always go together because they're always one and the same. The same as you cannot have a one-sided coin. It's like the Zen cone, you know, what's the sound of one hand clapping? It's powerful when you let this in. So really be willing to let it in. Remember that these meetings are an invitation for you to look presently at your own experience. And it's absolutely useless. Really, I mean that, absolutely useless if you're just taking it at an intellectual level. If you're only not, this is not to say that an intellectual level is not useful or even necessary, but I'll start there and then don't excuse yourself and let it penetrate all the way so that you can really see the truth of it. So this is really, it's a direct invitation for you to see directly your own experience right now and to accept that that is all that's needed, that there is no other thing, that there's no condition for this. There's only, the only requirement is that you see that it, well, at least to get us started. That's the only requirement. So you want to, right now, look at how whatever is being said, the habit is to compare to reduce the vibration of what it is that's being shared to some snapshot of some words, and then, which are dead, and then to compare them to your other dead knowledge of the past. Now, notice that there's no possibility of newness there, none, because you've already limited it. You're limiting it by virtue of the fact that you're seeing through the filter. The filter is the limitation. It can't limit ultimate reality. It can't limit the truth of who you are, but it limits your experience because it is your perception, and your perception is your experience. So see, and along with that, so now we want, okay, now let's get back to this notion of belief. Okay, so belief, conditioning, we started to explore those in direct experience and see how, if you really allow yourself to look directly at what is the actual lived reality of whatever it is that's being pointed to with these words of conditioning or belief, look directly for yourself and see, what is this? What is this when I look right now for myself? Now, at first, if you don't have much experience with this, if you're fairly new, this will seem like crazy talk. You won't have any clue how to do it, and that's okay, because that's how we have to start where we are. Everybody starts there. So notice again the tendency to make an exception. You say, well, it works for, this might work for some people, but it won't work for me. No, don't make the exception. It works for everyone because it is a process that's in alignment with universal principles. It's simply looking at reality as it is. That's it. It's not, it just simply works. But like any skill, when we don't have any, when it's truly new, this is the hallmark of something that's truly new, we don't have any clue. So think about this. You've had these experiences where you encountered something that was truly new to you. And there's something about that that's magical. When the first time that you encounter something that's totally new, that you had no expectation that this could even be, whatever that may be. Maybe for some of us, maybe we've been so closed down and so hardened and so fixated on the filters that we haven't really encountered true newness in that way for a long time. But you might remember back when you were a child that even if you don't remember the specific events, you can remember that feeling of awe of, I've encountered something totally new. This is blowing my mind. I didn't know that this existed. Like you see somebody, the first time you saw somebody juggle, first time you saw somebody do a handstand, the first time, you encounter these certain things that are just totally new. So when you first encounter something totally new, notice the tendency is to try and reduce it into something that is not new, something that's already known. And how do we do that? Through all of our various strategies. One is just to stay superficial, another is to distract over there, something different. Another is to, sort of sour grapes. We say, oh, well, it's not really that great anyway. It's not what I thought it was. It's not really that magical. It's not really new. It's just some thing. Or, make the exception and say, well, that might work for them, but there's something special about them. It couldn't work for me. Well, then you see it's reliable. When you do those things, will that newness penetrate? Will that newness really enter into your life? Of course not. So here we're wanting to really open to that newness and allow it to enter in a profound way. So see what is the nature actually of belief directly. So we're going deeper. Look to see what happens. How do you know that anything is what you believe it is? And when you look at this, you'll start to hopefully see what I'm talking about when I say that it is a doing. There is no perception, there is no experience without you doing. The doing is 99+% of the time it's unconscious, which means by virtue of the fact that it's unconscious, we don't know it. We don't know consciously. We don't even know that we're doing it. But you look around at other people. Have you noticed that? I'm sure you've noticed it. I'm sure you've noticed certain quirks. Maybe you noticed them about me because a lot of you tune into this regularly. So you notice certain things that I do. And we just, whatever those are, certain tics or certain mannerisms, gestures, habits of clearing the throat or ways of blinking or all kinds of things, okay? Certain things that people are doing. And normally it just kind of flies under the radar. It just sort of registers as, well, you kind of notice it, but then you tune it out. And you just accept, oh, that's just how that person is. But which may be, but you might wonder why. Why does everybody behave so differently? Why do people have these funny unconscious behaviors? Well, take a look and then notice that if it's true, you look out there at all those other people and you'll notice that this is true of everybody. I mean, if you don't believe me, go somewhere in public where you'll see people and you'll notice this is what's going on. Everybody has their unique patterns of behavior. Just the way they carry themselves. You notice the way everybody's got their particular posture, their particular way of carrying themselves, their particular way. Some people have their head always tilted to the side, and some people are hunched forward, and some people are always standing on one leg or the other leg. Some people are, like I gave the example, clearing their throat. Some people, they're popping their neck, all these things that people are doing. And all of it, they don't even know consciously. Well, hello, you are doing the same. And all of that unconscious doing, which you can see everybody else doing all the time, all that unconscious doing is what you are experiencing. You are experiencing your own doing, but it's 99% of it is unconscious. But it can be made conscious. And as it's made conscious, now something new can enter. So notice, again, we're looking to see directly what is belief, or what is conditioning, beyond just the academic notion of it, or beyond your particular pre-existing knowledge about it, your set of symbols that you have held on to as a substitute for the truth. Look to see directly what is the actual living truth. And you'll see that belief is a doing. And when I say it's a doing, I'm not saying that there's one particular doing. What I'm saying is that I'm just saying it's a doing. So don't look for a particular doing. Don't think that it's, that I'm suggesting there's one very specific activity that is belief. I'm saying that belief is just a word that we give for these patterns of action. So so this is good news. Why is this good news? In case it's not clear. When we become aware, so this is unconscious, so our beliefs, which are they're synonymous with our experience. And if we're not liking our experience, guess what? We're not liking our beliefs, which now we're also saying is synonymous with something that we're doing. Well, hold on. Notice the power of that. The implication is that, which I'll just make explicit now, is that if you don't like your experience, what's actually true is you don't like what you're doing. It's unconscious, but nonetheless, you're doing it. And as long as you're blaming something else, anything else, even if you go through some funny mental gymnastics to blame something that's sort of you and sort of not you, like to say my feelings, or I'm a victim of my feelings, or I'm a victim of my thoughts, which is sort of like it's me, but it's not me. But it's an object. You're objectifying it, and you're saying I'm the victim. And you have to see, isn't that what's going on? You perceive that you're a victim of your own experience. So you see how we've objectified experience. We've said experience is this thing, and I am a victim of that thing. If only I wasn't depressed, if only I wasn't anxious, if only I didn't have negative thoughts, if only I wasn't, fill in the blank. But notice, every time we do that, what we're doing is we're keeping it superficial, and no matter then what we do, and we've tried so many things, we've tried, I'm not even going to begin to detail all the things we've tried, but because you've tried them. And you've maybe even got a list of things that you think, I haven't tried those yet, but I can, I might try those. So you just see how many things there are to try to fix it. But notice everything that you've tried to fix it hasn't given you good results. Maybe some of them seem too short-term, but none of them have given you adequate long-term sustained results. Well, maybe now you can see why, which is that everything that we've done, I'm repeating myself, but everything that we've done was done despite the fact that we sincerely believed we were doing something different in order to help ourselves. It was all actually feeding into the unconscious patterns of the unconscious activity that continues to produce the same unwanted experience. Okay, so what is the remedy? Well, see how you're doing it. And as I said, this is learning a new skill. So we have to have the correct expectations. If we have the incorrect expectations, we're going to be easily discouraged and we'll give up prematurely, and then we won't get the benefits. So we have to understand that what I am experiencing is not the product of the past. This is a common misunderstanding, and it's very disempowering. Notice how that just feeds back into the same vicious cycle. Well, it's product of the past. Well, oh goodness, that's overwhelming, isn't it? That whole passage I can't go back and fix, and oh, I'm burdened by that. I'll never get out from under this. But that's not true. What's actually true, and this is so powerful, really, honestly, so let this in, is that what you are experiencing is none other than what you are doing now. It is not bound by time. There is no element of past in it other than as a figment of your imagination that keeps you distracted so that you don't see what you're doing now. So what we want is to really get clear on the fact that what I'm experiencing is 100% exactly what it is that I'm doing now, not anything other than that. This is such good news, because what that means is that simply by becoming more clearly, consciously aware of what I'm doing that has been unconscious, but nonetheless producing this experience, I now have the real, honest to goodness possibility of something of real change. So this sounds good, maybe, hopefully, but there's one problem, which is that the conscious, I'll just use the words consciousness and unconsciousness to refer to these aspects of awareness. So awareness is, in and of itself, is neither conscious nor unconscious in the ways that I'm using those terms. So the terms that I'm using, conscious and unconscious, are referring to the quality of the awareness. So, and we know directly the difference. We know something's unconscious because it doesn't register consciously. And that means we have no volition, no voluntary control over it, because we are not conscious of it. So that's really the difference. And there are biological correlates to these notions, so I'm using them in a particular way, and we can understand that really, literally, biologically, there correlates to the conscious and unconscious. And we know this in terms of common everyday learning. We know that in order for learning to occur, I guess I should say there's an exception to this rule. It's not really an exception. It's just a more detailed understanding that we won't go into detail on right now. But under certain with certain levels of intensity, learning can take place without there being these conscious components to them. Or if there's a conscious level, it's like a flash. But we'll make it, for now, we'll just set that aside. Because for our conversation now, what's most useful is to see this more broadly true thing, which is that for most of our learning, we already have some existing conditioning. So we came into this life with conditioning. That everybody here was born. And everybody went through a gestation period and then was born. So, there's no way to escape that in those 9 months and then in this huge event of birth, that there's not conditioning. There's absolutely conditioning. That's because this is a phenomenal reality. It's all polarized. So you have polarized experience. This gives shape and form. You have to have shape and form. So we're not trying to get rid of shape and form. We're trying to have conscious choice so that we can have greater efficiency and greater ease. And we can play rather than perceiving that we're victims. So we can play with form rather than feeling bound by form. But we want to see that we come into this lifetime already with some conditioning. So from that point forward, all learning, with the caveat of that thing that I said we're not going to go into detail on, but most learning follows a certain pattern, which I've talked about before, but I'll just clarify it again or remind us of it again here, which is that we start with the existing conditioning. So this is unconscious. Conditioning is unconscious. And the unconscious, when we're experiencing pain, it means that that unconscious learning is inadequate for the present manifest reality. So it's just inadequate. All learning is limited, remember, because it's conditioning. There's polarization. It's this, not that. So all conditioning is limited. We'll never achieve the ultimate conditioning. Forget about that. That's sort of the notion that some of us have about enlightenment. We're going to achieve the ultimate conditioning. Incorrect. Please let go of that. It's very unhelpful. We have conditioning. All conditioning is limited. Instead of deluding ourselves, we want to just tell the truth about that, which is, oh yeah, okay, there's conditioning. That's what's happening. All this experience is conditioning. Now I'm noticing there's a feedback loop. It's giving me information about the nature of the conditioning, because 95% of it is unconscious. I didn't make this explicitly clear, but I'll do so now. The reason for that is that it's just how this works. I can't tell you why. I can just tell you that it does. We can just observe that it's true, and you can see the same for yourself, that the unconscious can run many things in parallel, which is why your heart can beat and your digestion can function, and you can think about things, and you can go for a walk, and you can do all of these things at the same time, because all of those are happening unconsciously, because there are patterns that are established. So this is the conditioning. But when we encounter pain, discomfort, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or otherwise, then what's happening is there's a beautiful feedback mechanism. Is just showing us, it's like a little alarm going off saying, hey, this existing conditioning is limited and not applicable here. So what's the correct understanding and the correct response to that is, oh, let me become consciously aware. That's the correct response. But notice, when I say correct, I mean the profitable one, the useful one. But most of the time, you got to see what we do is we say, oh my God, how do I fix this? Now, every time we do that, what we're doing is reinforcing the existing conditioning, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So the correct, profitable understanding and response is, oh, feedback, limited conditioning that's not applicable here. Let me become conscious and notice. So what am I becoming conscious of? So there's unconscious conditioning. Now I'm going to become conscious. So I'm making these gestures because I've referred in the past to these 4 quadrants. So I'll be using those same quadrants again. I'll try to stick to the theme. So we start with in this quadrant here where we have unconscious incompetence, meaning that the conditioning, the existing conditioning is inadequate. Maybe not inadequate in all contexts, but it's inadequate in this context. So it needs updating. But it's unconscious incompetence. Now, as long as it stays here, it just stays here. Nothing is going to change. And 99+% of everything that we do trying to fix the problem just stays here. If you're thinking about it, you're here. We need to shift over here to conscious incompetence. Now, notice we have an unrealistic expectation most of the time. We say, okay, fine, I'll bite, I'll follow along, I'll make it conscious, but it should become conscious competence right away. No, it doesn't work that way. Unconscious incompetence has to go to conscious incompetence. Notice I emphasize this quite a lot by saying we're becoming aware of what we've been doing unconsciously. So we're incompetent, meaning the action that we've been taking that is the same thing as our experience, which we don't like, is clearly inadequate for reality in this moment. So we need to become conscious of what we're doing. Most of what the world says, forget about that. That's hard. Do this instead. Just take this course or this workshop or read this book, apply this technique, learn these skills, do these things. You just stay here because you're not engaged in learning. You're not bringing into consciousness the existing conditioning, which is what is producing the experience. So we need to shift from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. This is the hard part. This is where we give up most of the time before we've even gotten started. And then we say, oh, I've tried everything and woe is me, nothing works. But we're deceiving ourselves because we haven't actually really done what would work. We give lip service to it, but we didn't really do it because to shift from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Now, here's the other variable, and I've talked about this before, but I didn't mention it yet today. I'll mention it now, is that, so I did say that unconscious can run many things in parallel. That's why we can walk and chew gum at the same time and have the heart beating, and all magnificent the number of processes that can be run in parallel by the unconscious. It's not our enemy. It's like, it's what's running this reality. It's very powerful. It's not our enemy. It's our ally. But we have a misunderstanding of it, so which is what we need to correct. So we just want to see it correctly, which is it's running all of this, and it can do all of this simultaneously. Consciousness, on the other hand, one, only one, no more than one, only one. One. Not two, can't do two things at the same time, only one thing. Can't even be aware of more than one thing at a time, can only be aware of one thing. For consciousness, there is only one. So now notice what's happening here in unconscious incompetence is that there's this whole learning, the whole process that's going on unconsciously. It's very complicated, actually. You think about so many of the things that we take for granted, but that we worked very hard in the process of learning them. You look at a baby learning to walk. I mean, it's a serious thing. It takes a lot of work to learn. And so it's a very complicated thing. It's very, very, very complicated. And I mean, the act of walking involves the entire body, every single muscle in the body, hundreds of muscles, you know, trillions of nerve cells, all working in perfect harmony in order to produce this one thing. But this one thing it's like I'm saying, it's this orchestra. It's huge, very elaborate. So then to bring that, which is unconscious, into consciousness, well, it's like, hold on a second, we got to slow way down. You try to shove all of this, which can run perfectly fine in the unconscious, into conscious, you're clogging up everything. You know, you got to understand, it's single file. You put one thing at a time through here. So you have to slow way down. This is the point when this occurs, we start to experience a lot of intensity. And depending on the conditioning of the nervous system, we will typically interpret that intensity in a negative way. We will call it panic, anxiety, anger, fear, frustration, discouragement, depression, etc. We'll be worrying. We'll have intense compulsions. All of that's happening. This is where 99% of the time we give up. So how do we remedy that? Well, big part of it is to have the correct understanding, big picture view, which is what we're trying to get clear on today. And then to persistence, gentle persistence. This is like the key to success with any learning, isn't it? I mean, what is that? If at first you don't succeed, try again. Maybe not the words I would choose necessarily, but it's an expression. So it points to the same thing. We all know this, and we would advise, if you have you have a young child who you care for in any capacity as a parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle or whatever, You know that when this young child is encountering newness and is engaged in learning, that if they want to give up, you will remind them of this truth because you can see it. You know what's possible for them. You know, the child who wants to ride the bike and they get to a point where they say, this, you know, will never work for me. I can't do it. This is stupid. But you know that they can. You know that it's not how they're perceiving it. You know that if at first you don't succeed, try again. If you get up on the bike again, if you keep on doing it, eventually you'll get better. So the same is absolutely true of this process of learning. It's really about learning how to learn. So we can, the same way that we can learn anything, we can apply to learning how to learn. And that's very powerful. When we're learning how to learn, this will smooth out everything and everything will become better. Hopefully that's clear why. So that's really the process that we're involved in here, is learning how to learn. So we go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Most of the time we give up here, but don't give up. Slow down. Become aware of the breath. The breath is will give away exactly what you're doing that's unconscious. It's like if you just let your attention rest with the breath, you will discover so much. You don't have to work hard at it. You just rest and just remain aware, and it's all revealed to you. That might seem like a bold statement, but it's really just the truth. So what do I mean by that? Well, just observe your breath right now and notice, is the breath easy? Is it satisfying, pleasurable? Now, if you just accept a superficial level response to that, you'll either say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. But the aim here is not just to come up with an answer. It's to point us to look for ourselves and then to keep looking, because it's an endless process. And normally the notion of it being an endless process seems horrible, nightmarish to us, but notice why that is. It's just because we have associations with that. See, there's nothing inherently problematic about an endless process, because imagine now an endless process of expanding bliss. Does that sound so bad? Hopefully not. But we're accustomed to perceiving that the inevitable reality of life is that it is suffering. And so an endless process, we assume that means an endless process of suffering. And that really is synonymous with an endless process of seeking, an endless process of fixing, an endless process of avoiding, an endless process of strategizing, an endless process of holding on. Well, of course, we don't want that. That's horrible. But notice that when we have a resistance to an endless process, what we're actually doing is continuing to keep ourselves engaged in an endless process. Whereas if we open to that, if we really accept what's being pointed to, the real truth of an endless process of expansion of bliss, what I'm saying is that that this becoming conscious of the unconscious incompetence is the movement of that endless process of the expansion of bliss. We're just looking at it the wrong way, but look at it in the right way, and all of a sudden it's not bad. It's wonderful. It's joyous. So we're wanting to become aware. We want to have the right attitude, the right understanding, the right outlook. It will be very, very helpful. Otherwise, we're going to give up. So know that you're doing it correctly. You're seeing, you're discovering, you're experiencing this shift of the unconscious incompetence becoming competent. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel frustrated, if you feel whatever you feel, that's fine. You're just to notice that, and then notice how you do that. So remember, all the experience is something that we're doing. So notice, this is back to the breath. Notice, is the breath satisfying? Is the breath easy? Is the breath blissful? And what is your reaction to the suggestion that it even could be? Notice how there's a contraction, a shutting down, a distraction, all these various actions, subtle perhaps, but nonetheless actions that we're taking, kind of flinching, scanning, seeking, all these various strategies. And you can, just by observing the breath, you can become aware of them. Initially, again, and we're shifting from unconscious to conscious, it has to slow down and it has to become single file. So what was this big glob of action has to become slowed down and has to become sequential. So initially, usually our conditioning has us perceiving that as overwhelming. Oh my goodness, this is horrible. Stay with it. Just be willing to stay with it. What then starts to happen as you stay with it is you're starting to, without trying, because you can't anticipate this, you can't predict it, but you can just simply, by continuing to remain conscious, just observing what's happening, notice that bit by bit, what's unnecessary, painful, strenuous, starts to slowly dissolve, fall away. You might notice that, or you might notice that there's a tendency to be resistant to that. Either one is fine, because in a sense, you're still noticing the same thing. You're just noticing the conditioning. You're noticing what's unnecessary. You're noticing what it is that you're doing that's painful, even if you're not yet fully aware of exactly how you're doing it and how you can become regain voluntary control and release it. Because there's still fear involved. It's fine. That's part of the process. But you're becoming aware, and as you remain with it, what happens is now, without trying or predicting in advance how it would look so that you emulate it, rather from within, a more efficient pattern begins to emerge, and effortlessly it's repeated. So there's repetition simply by being willing to let go of what is unnecessary. A more efficient pattern emerges, and it continues to refine and refine. So now we're shifting from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. So this is a very important step in the learning process that most of the time we don't get to, but here we're learning how we can. Then at a certain point, it's basically the same thing. We just stay with this. Then there's a shift, it becomes unconscious again. Why is that important? Because then that more efficient pattern can be run in parallel so that you can be doing all of these other things. Because we're not here, and you can see this, that we're not here merely to know ourselves. That's half of it. We're here to know ourselves, which is what the parts of this process of learning are about. But then we're also here to express. Otherwise, why all this? I mean, this is the desire to express. So we want that more efficient pattern to be learned so it can be unconscious and that can be functioning. And then we can continue to engage in this process of learning so that there can continue to be this expansion of bliss. How do we know that that's true? Well, try it out and you'll see that it's true. You directly know it's true because you are experiencing that bliss. I mean, it's self-evident. So this is really all I want to cover in the formal portion today. Remember that this is, as I've already pointed out, but I'll point out again, it's not of any real value if it's just taken as an intellectual exercise merely. So really let it in, I'm simply pointing out something. I'm just pointing it out, but you have to, it's like I'm like a guide on a journey, and you have to be willing to take the steps. We're doing it together, but I can't do it for you. So just see what's being pointed to and then put it into practice. And you can put this into practice. Hopefully you're already putting it into practice, and then just keep on doing it. And I'll leave it at that for now. So for those who are here live, we can stay on for the Q&A. And so let me end this recording and I'll switch it over